Welcome to On Air with World Aware, a series that looks at evolving situations around the world and provides insights into what to expect in the near term. Today, we have Philip Stoikovsky, a member of World Aware's Europe Intelligence Analyst team. Philip is going to provide insight into the recent elections in Belarus, in which the incumbent president, Alexander Lukashenko, was re-elected in a landslide vote, and the uprising and demonstrations in the days since. Philip, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you.
Significant unrest has been ongoing in Belarus since the August 9th presidential election, which official exit polls reported had been won by incumbent Alexander Lukashenko with 80% of the vote. So demonstrators started gathering almost immediately to denounce what they viewed as rigged results of the election. A closer election was expected, so his 80% result appeared to be an unlikely turnaround. The protest activity, including industrial action and walkouts by factory employees and public transport staff, has continued since and has been met with a fairly uncompromising reaction by the security forces. So more than 10,000 protesters have been arrested so far, while hundreds have been injured and hospitalized in clashes with security forces. Police have used tear gas, rubber bullets, stun grenades, and in several instances, live ammunition against the demonstrators. At least 4 people have been so far killed. Internet outages have been reported all over Belarus in what is likely an attempt by the government to disrupt activism. In addition, security forces raided the Belarus joint offices of Russian firm Yandex and US firm Uber. The raid might have been connected to the unrest, and there are suspicions that authorities somehow connected staff to the unrest were after getting the passenger records to assist them in targeting activists. So the largest and most disruptive demonstrations have occurred in Minsk, while additional demos have been reported in all other major cities throughout the country. So despite the largest demonstrations that Belarus has seen in recent history, Lukashenko is clearly committed to staying in power for at least another mandate. On the face of it, he appears safe. Security forces, national institutions, and the domestic media remain loyal to him. However, if the situation deteriorates significantly, the support of senior officials could increasingly depend on Lukashenko's willingness to accept a gradual transition of power. This could in turn allow people around him to preserve the wealth they have accumulated over the past 3 decades. So those close to the president could begin to pressure him towards this route. The opposition would likely accept such an arrangement. So the signs are that a deterioration is on the cards. So the timeline here shows major events in recent days and illustrates how tensions are ratcheting up in the country. 2 days after the election, the main opposition candidate, Svetlana Tikhanovskaya, fled to neighboring Lithuania amidst rumors of threats against her and her staff by Lukashenko. Although she initially asked supporters to accept the results, this was almost certainly done under duress. She has since called for demonstrators to not accept the election results. So the last time we saw any signs of compromise from Lukashenko was on August 13th, when he issued conciliatory statements towards injured protesters. This was done during a period of uncertainty and possibly surprise at the fervor of the protests, which, as I mentioned earlier, are unprecedented in Belarus. So Lukashenko was likely trying to appease the populace while calculating his next move. A symbolic victory for Lukashenko came on August 16th, when Russian President Vladimir Putin gave reassurances to protect Belarus from external threats in a phone conversation with Lukashenko. Having support from Belarus's major international sponsor, Russia, is likely to reassure Lukashenko about his position and make him resistant to any compromise. With Moscow's backing, he will feel that he could ride this crisis out. So undeterred by this, however, on August 17th, factory workers started a nationwide strike. So factories in Belarus are generally state-owned. So this means that a strike would be viewed as a direct action against Lukashenko. So it's currently unclear as to how much of the workforce is supporting the strike. Some reports suggest that work has resumed at affected factories despite the strike. However, widespread support for a prolonged strike would put additional pressure on Lukashenko. A protracted strike would be very damaging to the economy and will likely cause even further public dissatisfaction. So a couple of days later, in an attempt to put pressure on Lukashenko and the government to release arrested demonstrators, to refrain from further use of excessive force, and to come to the negotiation table, EU officials announced plans for sanctions against Belarusian officials involved in election results falsification and also the repression against demonstrators. However, on the same day, Lukashenko ordered his security forces to forcefully disperse demonstrators. So now this is clearly what they have been doing anyway in recent days, and it remains unclear as yet as to what impact his order will have on the tone of the protest. But it further reinforces the idea that with the support of his officials, the security forces, and with Moscow's public backing, Lukashenko is in no mood to compromise. So where do we go from here? Additional violence is likely in the next few weeks as the protest movement does not seem to be abating despite the government crackdown. It is likely that more people will become willing to get involved in the demonstrations as they become directly affected by governmental response to it. It is also possible that we will begin to see the occasional high-profile allegations of extreme brutality by security forces, as well as dissident reports from exiled opposition figures, opposition bloggers, and others about the levels of repression that are being used against Lukashenko's opponents. So Lukashenko seems to have several options at his disposal at the moment. His attempt to break up the unrest by using targeted violence against demonstrators did not work and might even backfire. Many people joined the demonstrations after hearing about the abuse that arrested demonstrators went through. At this point, he will likely have to resort to an even harder crackdown on the movement and possibly involve the army. This could, however, prove difficult, as many members of the security and armed forces might not be willing to use indiscriminate violence against their fellow citizens. Remember, most of the army comprises of conscripts who don't hold privileged positions within the current regime, which might be the case with sections of the Belarus police and internal security forces. What makes it even more difficult for Lukashenko is that there are no ethnic or societal divisions that he could exploit. He could ask Vladimir Putin to provide additional security personnel. However, although Putin has reportedly agreed to support Lukashenko, it remains to be seen how far he is willing to go in that support. Russian officials likely fear that a successful toppling of Lukashenko could encourage opposition elements within Russia, but might not see a major involvement in Russia in their best interest. The fact that Putin has not yet publicly expressed the willingness to back Lukashenko personally could mean that official Kremlin is yet unsure on how to act in this situation. And there are several reasons for this. So there's seemingly no major pro-Lukashenko support base that the Kremlin could exploit. Additionally, there is no real anti-Russian sentiment amongst demonstrators, as was the case in Ukraine. So a Russian military intervention could actually turn the public in Belarus against Russia and Putin and effectively create a problem that is not currently there. So with neither side looking like backing down anytime soon, the protests are likely to continue, not least because opposition activists will likely be feeling bolstered by statements of support from the EU and other regional players. Whether such statements will ever turn into something more tangible remains to be seen, but a deterioration in the security environment in Belarus is likely in the coming weeks and months. So businesses operating in the country will likely face major disruptions caused by heightened security, clashes, and internet outages. Additionally, raids by security forces against foreign firms and non-governmental organizations in the country are possible in cases where security forces determine connections to the protest movement. In response to the unrest in Belarus, World Aware has raised the CSAR, which indicates the level of threat from low to moderate in both Belarus and Minsk. We are reluctant to increase yet again, as most threats could be mitigated by sensible security precautions. However, we are looking into indicators that the threats might increase and that foreign businesses could be more directly targeted. The indicators include the following. First indicator will be indiscriminate violence. This will be a scenario in which security forces and army crack down even harder on the demonstrators, disperse all major gatherings, whether peaceful or not, and start arresting factory workers that are striking. This could signal a deterioration. The second scenario would be anti-EU and Western rhetoric. So if we start seeing reports of anti-Western speeches by Lukashenko and officials, this could signal a deterioration. And the third scenario is Russia sends in security forces to assist Lukashenko or to attempt to restore order. This scenario would likely have the most serious implications and would signal a major security deterioration in the country.
Well, thank you so much, Philip, for taking the time to provide great insight into the situation and the importance for all organizations to stay vigilant in the coming months. To our listeners, thank you for tuning in. For more information on WorldAware's actionable risk intelligence and risk management platforms, visit worldaware.com. Thank you.